Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Memphis Horticultural Society's presentation for March. Our speaker tonight is Dr. Christine Coker, who is from Mississippi State University's Coastal Research and Extension Center. And she's also an associate research and extension professor of urban horticulture and the research leader of the Beaumont Horticultural Unit. We were chatting at the beginning of this, and it turns out that she's a Tennessee girl from the Nashville area, but she's kind of been all over the South. She earned her BA in biology at UT Martin and her MS in biology at Austin Peay and her PhD in horticulture at Auburn University. Her research and service activities intersect at the dinner table. Her work focuses on commercial vegetable production, home gardening, school gardens, and community food systems, but her volunteer activities have been included serving on the board of directors at Loaves and Fishes, which is a community kitchen and local food ministry, and the advisory board of the Mississippi Farm to School Network. She's also very active in organizations that serve and empower professional women. When she has a spare moment, whenever that is, I don't know, she enjoys downtime at home with her family, reading, scrapbooking, and planning her next vacation. So with that, I turn it over to you, Dr. Coker.
Thanks so much, Steve. I'm so happy to be here with everybody. I was telling Steve before we got started, I really miss being with people. And so hopefully I will make it up to Memphis sooner rather than later. My mother-in-law still lives in Union City, and I have family in Dyersburg, and so friends all over West Tennessee. So a visit is long overdue. So tonight, my topic is a little different than how I've presented before, because it's actually two topics. And so I decided we're going to go with gardening from top to bottom. So I'm actually a certified green roof professional. And so I know there was some interest in the group about green roofs. And so I'm going to do a little primer, a little green roof 101, and not go too in depth in that, but just talk about what a green roof is. And then I'm going to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is sub-irrigated containers, because it is a super fun way to garden. Like Steve was saying, I work in urban horticulture, and that means I work with folks that have a single pot on their patio to somebody with a small farm. So if I can promote gardening in some way, somehow, and especially if you can eat it, I am a happy girl. So tonight we're going to talk about a couple of topics. So I'm going to kind of stop in the middle. After we do green roofs, we'll stop there and take some questions. And then we'll move on to the end, and then we can talk about all kinds of things. So let's get started, see how it looks. Okay. Let me make myself a little smaller here so I can see what I'm looking at. Okay. So let's start at the top, shall we? Just to give you a little idea of what we're looking at here in this picture, this is actually a green roof at the Armed Forces Retirement Home. And this is the green roof that I have the most direct experience with. There are two Armed Forces retirement homes in the country. One's in Washington, D.C., and the other is in Gulfport, Mississippi. And they get no taxpayer funding. The way the Armed Forces retirement homes are funded is every military personnel has 50 cents a paycheck. That's a line item that goes to this. And you must have been retired from the military or served in World War II to live here. So there are a lot of men who live here and their wives are still at the house and they like it that way. I'm talking about the wives. So, and there's actually some residents that live here that still have campers out back, and we're not going to talk about what they're doing out in the campers. But anyway, that's the Armed Forces Retirement Home green roof there. So what is a green roof? So we'll just start there. So a green roof system is basically a living extension on top of an existing roof. They all include the same elements of waterproofing, root repellents, drainage systems, filter cloths, growing mediums, plants. So no matter what kind of green roof you're looking at, they all have these layers. When I was taking my courses for my green roof certification, I had to take a whole course on roofing. That wasn't as fun as the plant course. They kept talking about asphalt and bitumen, and I didn't love that part. I'm like, can we talk about the plants yet? So green roofs are not new. They date back to ancient history. And they go back all the way to stone temples planted with vegetation, like the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. And these kinds of temples were actually called ziggurats. Kind of sounds like a cigarette, but it's not. In the 60s, they became more popular in Europe. There was a lot of concern about degraded quality in the urban environments. And then in the 80s and 90s, they really took a step up, and especially in Germany. So in 1989, Germany had 247 acres of green roof, which is quite a bit of vegetated roof. By 96, it was over 2,400 acres, and that number continues to grow. So just like in other areas, sometimes we're a little late to the party, but we are definitely there now and having a good time. So there's a lot of benefits to a green roof. Some of these are more public in nature, and some of these are more private in nature for like the roof owner. So some of the public benefits include aesthetic improvement. So a vegetated roof is a lot prettier than just a black asphalt roof. And you may be thinking, well, how often do I just see a black asphalt roof? Well, if you're in a skyscraper, a hospital, a large institutional building, a lot of times there is roof outside of your window. That always seems to be my hotel room too. So I always end up looking out over a vegetated roof, much lovelier. It's also good for water diversion and stormwater management. What we find, especially in urban areas, is that when we have a big rainstorm, all that water hits these impermeable surfaces and runs off. So you have all this stormwater, and now it's polluted stormwater. With a green roof, you slow down that water drainage, and it actually can absorb and be filtered out. The urban heat island effect, this is more of an issue in, like, say, a New York or Chicago, but it can improve the heat island effect. Improved air quality, because we know plants are doing their thing, and also new amenity spaces. So just like the picture I showed you at the very beginning at the retirement home, residents can actually enjoy that vegetated space. So some of the private benefits, so if you're the building owner, for instance, energy efficiency. So think about it, all these layers of membrane, soil, medium, plants, that's going to give you greater energy efficiency. It's basically like insulation. It actually also increases the durability of your roofing membrane. So what you see here in this picture, the bottom layer, that's your membrane. That's just like regular roofing membrane. Well, you have all these layers of protection on top of it, so your roof actually lasts longer. There's fire retardation, because face it, you've got green plants and moisture, so you're going to help with that. Electromagnetic radiation, because 5G is going to kill us. And also it's great for noise reduction. So think if you were living in the flight path of the airport, how many FedEx planes would you like to dull out with a green roof? And then there are design specific benefits. So increased biodiversity, health and well-being, ag, education, and we'll talk about all these a little bit. So increased biodiversity. So we do this on the ground all the time. We talk about increasing biodiversity with plants, whether we're talking about pollinators, or we're talking about butterfly gardening, or attracting birds. All this is increasing biodiversity, and all of this can be done with the plant material that you can use on a green roof. Health and well-being. So you can reduce pollution and increase water quality, like we talked about. So that can make us healthier. You can increase social cohesion and public safety because you've opened up a green space that people feel safe at, a community space. They're great for reducing stress levels, which in turn reduces headaches and ailments. If you're in a building that overlooks a green roof, you may have increased job satisfaction. Maybe you'll have a few less sick days. It can be a source of activity. So you actually have an outdoor space to go to. This picture on the left, the top picture, that is actually on a hospital roof. So how calming and nice would it be if you're spending time with someone in a hospital? And if you've ever had to do that, it's a drag. Hospitals are not beautiful. But to be able to have a nice, quiet, green spot to go to, or if you're a patient, and just to be able to get out and have a little bit of nature at your fingertips. Those are some great benefits for health and well-being. Urban agriculture is also really interesting on green roofs because you can reduce some of the public infrastructure that goes along with production agriculture. You can reduce food waste and you can compost right on site and put that right back into your agricultural system. You can reduce your urban footprint. You're not having to create new space to produce food. You're able to repurpose existing space. Of course, we know that with any kind of horticulture, community empowerment just follows. And also, you know, we talked again about biodiversity. So being able to draw in some biodiversity through food plants. This garden is actually by Fenway Park. It looks like they've used some turf, some artificial turf for their walkways. I would like my garden to look like that, but maybe with real turf, but somebody else to mow it. And of course, the educational opportunities are ridiculous. So the example I'm using here is actually putting green roofs on educational, institutional buildings. But you can use green roofs of any type in any location as an educational opportunity. But here's an example of students being able to do all the things that you would traditionally do in a school garden right there on their roof. Here in the South, and probably even, you know, in larger cities like Memphis, schools still have schoolyards. But in larger cities, schools don't really have schoolyards. So being able to utilize that roof space to bring in nature is a really cool opportunity. So here are the green roof components. Like I mentioned before, every green roof has similar setup. So you have the structural support on the bottom, you have your roofing membrane. You have this vapor control layer. You have some sort of insulation. Then you have this waterproof root repellent layer. Why that's super important is, of course, you want a waterproof layer on your roof because that's the whole reason we have roofing. But the root repellent layer is very important because can you imagine if plants started growing beneath your roof membrane and started hitting the wood of your roof? This would be problematic. So that root repellent layer, super important. Then you've got that drainage layer, and that's what's going to allow that water to run off. So, you know, the plants are going to absorb a lot of it, but there's always going to be some water at the bottom, and it's not like natural soil, so it can't percolate down forever. It's going to hit that membrane. So that's going to allow that to run off. Then you have your growing medium, which is going to be a soilless medium, and it can be more organic in nature or more mineral in nature. Excuse me. And then, of course, your vegetation, which is the best part of the green roof. So green roofs kind of come in 3 categories: extensive, intensive, and then the Goldilocks semi-intensive. So this is kind of a rundown. So extensive, the way to remember what extensive is it extends. So extensive green roofs are shallow. So shallow and they extend out. So you're looking at grasses, herbs, wildflowers, sedums, mosses, things that don't require a very deep soil profile. Usually these are low maintenance because you're looking at sedums and grasses and herbs. They don't require much. The no irrigation thing, well, once it's established, no. The Armed Forces Retirement Home has a lot of green roof. The contractors came in and installed it and then scooted. And there was no irrigation plan to get the plants established. So just like any garden bed, you do have to at least get it going. Also, it's cheaper to do an extensive green roof. And the weight, when we're talking about the weight, that's really important because especially if you're retrofitting a structure with a green roof, you really have to take that engineering into consideration, whether that roof can actually accommodate the weight that you're proposing. And with an extensive green roof, you're pretty good to go without much worry. Then you've got your semi-intensive. So you're still doing grasses, herbs, sedums, mosses, but now you can actually step it up a little bit to some shrubs. So in my dream semi-intensive green roof, I would definitely have some blueberries and some blackberries and some raspberries and some larger plant material like that. Again, maintenance is pretty low. Irrigation is going to be as needed. And again, we're getting a little heavier. And then the intensive green roof. So this is the type of green roof that you will see on hotels. You probably haven't really thought about it before, but if you've ever been to a rooftop pool at a hotel and they've got big trees and planters, that's really a kind of a green roof. So when you start looking at intensive green roofs, you're looking at large plant material, like actual trees and shrubs. A lot of times there's actually lawn planted in that. So it's much more, more like a park on a roof kind of feel. So I got a couple of examples of Memphis green roofs. So maybe you guys can check them out. So the one on the left is the Beale Street Landing. So that's where you get on the steamboat. So that's actually from the other side, it doesn't really look like a roof, but that's actually a vegetated lawn covered roof. And then the one on the right is the Bioworks Foundation building. And I'm not sure where that is. But again, this is another extensive green roof. So this is primarily turf. But what I love about the Bioworks Foundation is their use of hardscape and softscape. So they've brought in all these beautiful pavers. So even though it's not completely vegetated, it's very park-like. If I worked in that building, that would be my lunch spot for sure, except maybe July and August. Oh, I see the UT sign back there. So, okay, so it's over by UT Memphis then. And an old McDonald's in the background. So maybe somebody will be able to go check these out. So that sort of wraps up the top part. If we want to chat a little bit, let me bring up everybody's lovely faces.
We have a few questions. So, and this is probably not in a really good order. I noticed when we've seen bio roofs in, like you said, in Europe, they're becoming very popular. A lot of them are on homes that have pitched roofs. And so they do the low growing grasses or whatever. And so for a homeowner here in Memphis, that would probably be the most common option to, if they were going to retrofit an existing home.
Right.
So how practical is it to retrofit an existing home?
So you can totally do that. So I didn't go into it too much, but there are different systems. So you can actually purchase sheets of sedum. So for like a pitched roof and for like a residential application, once you have that waterproof membrane, you can actually roll out sheets of sedum. And that would be pretty easy to do because it's not going to add the weight that some of these other systems would do. And you basically can tack it into place or just put a little bit of edging. And you can do that. You can also do green roofs that come in modules. And it's almost, I equate it to a seed flat, but without the cells in it. So it's basically a 12 by 12 square. It's about this deep, so about like a seed flat, and it's filled with media. And then it's usually a mixture of sedums and succulents. And so it's just modular. So they're heavier, but you just stack them in place. So you kind of build a lip and then they just stack in place. If in my dream world, if I had my she shed, that's what I would do. Is I would use the sedum sheets or the modular pieces, and I would have a green roof she shed.
That's a great point that, it doesn't have to be necessarily a commercial building or your home. It actually could be something, another building on your property.
A detached garage, a carport.
Yeah, great. Great point. Thank you. So I think you kind of were gesturing at depth. We did have a question about soil depth or plant. First of all, what is the planting medium actually made out of? And second of all, how deep would this have to be for either, like you said, the sedum or grasses or something much bigger?
Okay. So for the sedum, you're looking pretty shallow. And the medium is kind of a perlite mineral based. So it's kind of finer rock than a terrarium, but it's sort of like succulent mix. Does that make sense? That would be like the most readily available thing I could equate it to. It's basically a succulent planting mix. So it's lightweight, but it really doesn't have soil characteristics. It's just holding the plant in place.
Okay.
And then as you get to larger material, then you start looking at using that as a base and then bringing in like a soilless potting medium as the next layer.
Okay. So if you were doing anything bigger than that, the sedum or some kind of low growing grass, probably you're talking about a flat roof situation. Yeah. And somebody asked about the weight, and I would say that, definitely that's something you'd have to get a contractor in to make sure that you don't need some additional structure in the attic or something.
For sure.
Another question that we had was about, I guess, this is drifting into the practicality. How practical is this to retrofit an existing home versus building with this in mind? I mean, is this expensive?
It would be expensive, and definitely more expensive as a retrofit, I would imagine, because pretty much everything is more expensive as a retrofit.
Yeah.
Changing your faucets is more expensive later, adding a water line is more expensive later. So really, it's at the engineering point, and that's where the money catches you for a retrofit versus in the plan. Because if you were building a house, you could adjust the pitch, you could adjust the structure early on, and it probably wouldn't add that much expense. But to retrofit, it would be more expensive. But to do this small scale on a shed or a garage or something, where you're not as concerned about the integrity. It's still important to keep your roof intact, but you're not as concerned about if there's going to be a small leak over time. You'll know, oh, I've got to work that out. You don't want to take that chance on your house.
Right. So I guess there's kind of two questions here. One of which is, you mentioned that the roofs last a lot longer, but do you ever have to replace your roof?
You will eventually have to replace your roof, just like any roof, but it will last much longer. Yeah. That's why the modular roofs or a thin sedum sheet work out really nicely, because with the modular, you can just pick up that module and do a roof patch.
Oh,
okay. Right there. I have seen roofs like the one at the retirement home where they've actually planted all of the mediums right there, hit on the roof surface, and it's planted into the roof. So for them to make a roof repair, they'll actually have to dig out the material and try to find where a leak is coming from. Whereas with modules, you can actually just pick those up and go, oh, there's the spot, and fix it right up.
Okay. Do you know if there are any programs or incentives for doing this? There are other things that if you do things that make your home more energy efficient, you can get a tax credit for it. Businesses obviously can't. Does this fall into that same sort of category?
I don't know about for homeowners. I know that it does give you credit if you're looking for a LEED certification, and that federal buildings at one time, now this could have changed, but at one time, all new federal buildings were required to have some percentage of green roof.
Okay. So it sounds like if anybody has had their interest sparked tonight, getting with a company that does this for a living would be the first step, is to find out what it's going to cost. Is your house or garden, house or garage, whatever, a practical, or if you're a business owner, whichever, a practical solution, and also what assistance or credits you can get from the government for that. So yeah, so the two sites that Christine showed us here in Memphis, most of you have probably seen Bill Street Landing, but if you've never been, like she said, if you've never been actually in the park or walked on top of it, you may not be aware that's there. And the other site that she showed us, the Bioworks, again, with UT and the McDonald's there, that's on Union Avenue, about where Baptist Hospital used to be. And I cannot tell you how many times I've driven past that, had no idea there was a green roof up there. But that's probably true for some of you with Bill Street Landing. So that's something to, that gives us something to explore this spring. So, okay, I think we've hit the bottom of the questions on that. So if you'd like to go ahead and switch gears and take it to the bottom, we're ready to roll.
Okay. So this is one of my favorite ways to garden. And this is sub-irrigated containers. And sub-irrigated containers come in different brands, come in do-it-yourself. The two that I'm most familiar with brand-wise are Earth Boxes. And you can order those directly from the company earthbox.com. And there's also one that I've gotten called a City Picker. And I got that at either Lowe's or Home Depot. I can't remember now. I've had it for a long time. But you can search sub-irrigated containers and you'll find lots of ideas. So again, I'm sort of just going to orient you to the parts of a sub-irrigated container, because whether you make one yourself, you buy one, or some combination of the two, these are the parts. So number one, you have a container. But unlike our other containers that we normally garden in, there are no holes in the bottom. That's the first thing we tell people about planting in containers. You've got to have good drainage. So sub-irrigated containers don't have holes in the bottom because they actually have a water reservoir in the bottom to hold that water. But you've got to have something to keep all the soil from just going down into that water. So you have this false bottom or a separator. Then you have a filling tube because as I'll show you later, you're going to use basically a plastic mulch over the top. So you've got to get the water down into the bottom there. And an overflow hole, which is super great because you really can't overwater a sub-irrigated container because there's an overflow hole. And then on the right, so this is like the most simplified version of a sub-irrigated container, and this is using a 2-liter Coke bottle. So you can tell I'm a Southern girl because I call it a Coke bottle and there's no brand on there. So this is just taking a 2-liter Coke bottle and basically creating that water well, using that capillary action to draw the water up and growing your plant. So these are a couple of pictures. The top one is an earth box. That's at my house. The bottom one is a homemade version. So regardless of whether you're buying a kit or making a kit, you've got to have that well in the bottom to hold the water so it'll get whipped up by the plants. And what this does is it creates a consistent moisture in the root zone. And that's why plants do so well in these containers, because they have that really consistent moisture. Because unless you get really zenned out watering your garden by hand, hardly anybody adequately waters. I'm just too impatient to stand there as long as I know I should to water my plants. And this is kind of a saving grace. So you need a growing medium that drains well. And I'll show you some examples of that. But it's also got to retain enough moisture for the plant's roots. So it's kind of creating this perfect balance. And again, this picture is showing you a different sort of cutout view of that water well in the bottom, and then that screen in the middle that gives you the separation between your medium and the water, and then that overflow hole, which is the magic. So this is the potting mix that I used in my earth boxes, and I'm going to show you some photos of me earlier in the pandemic with less hair using my earth boxes. But this is the mix I use. So it's not particularly special. You can find this type of mix at your garden center, but it's peat moss, perlite, some dolomite, a little limestone. This has a little organic starter charge fertilizer in it. That's really neither here nor there, but you kind of see the gist of what we're looking like here. There are lots of mixes you can get. That one I just showed you actually came with my earth box kit. If you order from Earthbox, and I'm not a spokesmodel, but you can get just the container or you can get the full kit, and that one happened to come with that particular media. But these are some other examples of potting mix that you might want to use. One of the great things about getting this peat-based mix is that you can get a cubic foot or like a 4 cubic foot compressed bale. And then when you get it home and pop it open, it expands. So it can like double in size. So you have twice as much media as you thought you had. So these are just some examples, everything from Miracle Grow mix to Sun Grow, Sunshine, Fafford. So these are all things you can find at either your garden center, some of these at your big box store. I'm sure you can order it online because I've learned I can get just about anything online now. So why do we recommend using a pre-mixed formulation? Usually it has something additional in it. Maybe a little controlled release fertilizer, maybe some micronutrients, maybe a little lime in there. Sometimes there are wetting agents. So like for instance, the Miracle Grow, you can get the moisture control Miracle Grow and it has that wetting agent in it. Sometimes mixed formulations will even have fungicides or it'll even be enriched with mycorrhizae. So you can get as fancy as you'd like with your medium. But it's important to not use dirt. So native soil doesn't act the same as a bagged garden soil. A bagged medium like we're talking about is going to have optimal porosity, aeration, and it's still going to have great water holding capacity. If you were to take native soil, it's no longer in its native environment. You have disrupted all the layers and it's not going to act the same in a container. I know that everybody here is a seasoned gardener and you know this, but it's always nice to have a little reminder. Plus, if you use native soil, your pots get super heavy. The other great thing about a peat-based medium is that you don't have to replace it every year. So after you grow plants in this, you can pull your plants out. Yeah, you're going to have little bits of root and stuff in there. It's fine. It's going to compost and turn into soil, but you don't have to replace your medium every year. You can just top it off and replenish it. And so once you get past that initial capital outlay, it actually gets a little cheaper in the subsequent years. So here's me with less hair. So what I'm doing here is I'm pre-wetting the soil. So the green box here on the right, that's my earth box. I've already put that screen separator in there. And you can see the little black tube, the water tube. So what I'm doing is I'm putting my soil in this other Rubbermaid and I'm lightly watering it. I don't want it muddy, but I do want it moist because once I plant my earth box, all the water is going to go in that tube and the plants are going to take the water up through capillary action through their roots. We're not going to be doing any watering at the soil surface anymore. So we want to go ahead and make sure that we have that really good moisture level to start to make sure that we continuously keep that consistent moisture. So like I mentioned, that's going to give us the capillary action. So we're going to start with moist soil. Then from then on out, we're going to water through that tube. So the water is going to go down to the bottom of the container and the media is going to act like a sponge and pull that moisture up to the plant roots. And like I mentioned before, we have that overflow hole, so we can't overwater. So that overflow hole is kind of at the intersection of the water reservoir and that separator. So you're never going to have plants with wet feet. They're never going to be sitting in mud because the water will never get to that level because of that overflow hole. So a lot of times I hear, well, does this mean I don't have to water it every day? Because there's a water reservoir. Well, you can get by with skipping a day sometimes, but you still need to water frequently, because what happens is if you let it go dry and that soil loses its moisture, you totally nixed that capillary action. So the soil can no longer act like a sponge to take that moisture up, and it's not going to get to the roots. So the great thing is, because of the reservoir, you won't have to water as much each day. So it won't take very long because you'll hit that overflow spot pretty quick. But face it, we live in the South and it's hot, and our plants are going to evapotranspirate a lot of water. So it's important to stay on top of your watering, even if you do have this water reservoir. What I have done in the past is cheated and use a little sprinkler tube like you would use for a hanging pot or a container, and have that hooked to my hose on a timer. So I'm getting a little water every day. So if you're traveling, you can use that little trick. Traveling, well, I wish. So you still have to fertilize, right? But fertilization looks a little bit different. You will still need a little lime, just like you do in regular potting mix, because peat bases tend to have a lower pH. They're a little acidic. So we do recommend a little bit of lime. This is the lime that came with my earth box, and that kind of gives you an idea of the mixture there. Nothing special. So you're going to put your soil. I should stop saying soil. I should say medium. But you fill up your box, okay? And you're going to put your lime in, and you're going to incorporate that just with your hands, okay? It seems like it would be such a great idea when you're putting in your water to just put a little Peters in there or a little Miracle Grow, because it's fertilizer and it's water soluble. Don't do it, because you can actually get a salt buildup and burn your roots. So we're going to talk about how to fertilize. So you can use controlled release fertilizer, or you can use just regular 888, 666, whatever fertilizer you like to use. So here I've made a big mess on my patio, but it's fine. And I've incorporated the lime. And now I'm just putting that fertilizer in a band just across the top. Now you can see here that the medium is like kind of piled up past the top of the container, and that's going to be important in just a second. But we're just going to do a band right across the top. So you don't need a lot of fertilizer, but this gives you an idea. About a ½ pound, which is only about a cup. So you've got to remember, this is just a container. So like I said, 888, 555, just whatever fertilizer you like, because we're gardeners and we're weird and we have preferences in fertilizer. It's just the people we are. You may have to come back and do a little supplemental fertilization or side dressing. So for instance, especially if you're growing tomatoes, we all know that tomatoes need some calcium because we don't want blossom end rot. And even though the consistent watering of a sub-irrigated container does help a lot with the control of blossom end rot, you can still get a calcium deficiency. And so you can actually put a little bit of calcium nitrate right into your water reservoir. This is the only thing I'm going to let you put in there, though. No Miracle Grow, but you can put about a teaspoon of calcium nitrate in there. Okay, so now we're going to cover it up. And basically this cover is going to serve as a mulch. Okay. And the reason, this is why we wanted the medium to be sort of piled up on top, because we need this plastic cover to come into contact with that soil surface. We don't want a big air pocket there. We want good contact. If you've ever been around commercial vegetable production, we do everything with black plastic mulch. And it is laid tight and tucked in right over the beds. And then we plant the plants through that. So it's almost like a weed barrier, but it basically serves all the same functions as any other type of mulch. It conserves moisture, it reduces weed pressure. If you're starting to garden early, black plastic helps warm it up faster. If you're not planting till the middle of the summer, you can flip this one over and it's white on the other side. So you can actually cool it off a little bit. But this is going to serve all the same functions as mulch. So in my little kit, I like to call it the mulch shower cap because it's actually elasticized all the way around. So you just stretch it out right over the top of the box. There's a little hole in the corner, so the little water tube is sticking out right there. You've got this great one here on the left that's a homemade, and they have taken, looks a little thicker than a clear trash bag, but not as thick as, say, a shower curtain. So this could have been some wrapping off of something, but you could use a black lawn trash bag that would work perfectly as your plastic mulch. But the whole trick is to keep it sealed tight. So here I've got it stretched out. You can see it's pretty nice and tight. And I'm planting a few herbs. My patio is still a mess at this point because who cleans up in the middle? I don't understand why my husband, who's taking the pictures, is not cleaning up behind me, but you know. And then ta-da! So here's my finished earth box. You see the water tube on the left. I have a little tomato here. I needed to tie it up. I'm super fancy, so I used a piece of PVC that I happen to have laying around so that I could just tie my tomato as it grew. It gets the job done. You can totally use a tomato cage. You can absolutely stick a trellis in there if you're doing some cucumbers or some peas. You can make it as pretty or as utilitarian as you would like it to be. And then after you get it all planted, you can enjoy the fruits of your labor. Thank God this is not my husband that was taking my pictures. But you can basically grow anything in a sub-irrigated container that you can grow in your garden. I used to say you could grow anything in a container that you can grow in your garden, and that's true, but you can grow so much more abundantly in a sub-irrigated container for the smaller amount of space than you can in a regular container. It's really amazing, and I really enjoy using them. And I would like to suggest that if you get one with wheels. So we got some more questions?
Yeah, we do have a couple. And while we're chatting, if those of you have any other questions, please put them in the chat box. Let's talk about containers, and then we can talk about plants after that. Just a general comment from me, several of the planters I have that I bought in the past few years are that black recycled plastic, and they have everything that you talked about for the sub-irrigation, except they don't have the pipe to water them from above. But you know, I do know in my garage I've got some PVC pipe from some previous projects, so you know that's really ready to go. And just as I was thinking, gee, I didn't realize how close I was to having this whole system in place. Yeah. So one thing you didn't, I noticed like these containers here, I can recognize they're like Sterlite or Rubbermaid containers. Is it practical? All these containers are basically sealed, they're waterproof. Is it practical to try to do this with a raised bed? You know, we teach through the Master Gardener program that, you know, the 4x8 raised bed. Is there a way to do something on that scale with, but still with sub irrigation, or is that not practical?
I'm gonna think about this a minute.
Because it'd have to be waterproof, and that's the part that I'm failing at.
I really think you could do it with a kiddie pool.
Oh. Well, you know, one of our speakers last year was making a bog with a kiddie pool. Maybe that we should just invest in a bunch of kiddie pools then.
You know, you can get them pretty big, but you can also get kiddie pools get pretty small. But you know, it's going to keep you from being with a raised bed. The thing that pops into mind first is getting it waterproof on the bottom first.
Right.
But yeah, if you started out with something, you know, with a bottom in it, like a kiddie pool or something along those lines, yeah, I don't see why you couldn't make that happen. It's all about that overflow hole.
Right. So another question is for, as far as plants themselves. Now, you just said anything you can put in a container, you can put in a raised container, but are there any plants that maybe this would be a bad solution for?
I keep thinking I will come across one. I have a friend down here who now has like over 100 earth boxes. He grows everything in them. So, you know, at first I would say, well, maybe not corn, because you just can't get that many stalks of corn in that amount of space. And, you know, you only get a couple of ears of corn from a stalk or whatever. He grows all his corn in there. He just smashes them in there and grows corn. It's amazing. So if you don't mind giving up the space, that's really where it's an economic question, because that becomes sort of high dollar real estate when you've made that intensive little growing area. So it depends on if you're trying to grow for quality or quantity or both, and that will kind of decide. However, if you love a fresh ear of corn and that's what's going to make you happy, do it.
Well, and the good thing is, if you're talking about something like that, the cost is pretty minimal. You know, if you buy a pack of corn seeds and they don't thrive, what have you lost? You know,
Right.
So back to our other question, one of the folks that's attending tonight mentioned that she's seen YouTube videos of sub-irrigated raised beds. So that would be worth digging up, because again, keeping it waterproof where it retains that pool of water would be the tricky part.
I'm making myself a note.
Okay.
To go to YouTube and find that.
Yeah. Because I was thinking, again, as you were talking, there's a guy that I follow who's in Australia who uses all raised beds with these corrugated metal systems.
Right.
And I mean, he's a self-sustaining person, but again, he's not, I don't think he's trying to do sub-irrigation. So I like his systems, but I'm not sure that that would work unless you could figure out how to make those things waterproof again, or watertight. And then also, you went through a lot of material here. It's really great. Does your extension agent office have a publication that outlines how this is done?
Why, yes, we do. You played right into my hand. This one on the left. So you guys met my colleague, Dr. Bachman, previously. Right. So Dr. Bachman and I actually put this publication together on sub-irrigated containers. And he actually also has a couple of videos on our extension website where he's talking about them also. But if you go to the extension.mstate.edu, it's publication 2971. And it's sub-irrigated containers for the Mississippi gardener, but we do not discriminate against Tennessee gardeners. There's actually also a green roof publication by a colleague of mine in landscape architecture, and it doesn't have a publication number, but you can search on the extension website for green roofs, and it does also have some plant recommendations also.
Okay. Excellent. Okay, I think I don't see any more questions rolling in, so connect with me.
So this is where you can find me. If you think of something later on, drop me a note, tweet at me. My blog is a little lift right now. I've sort of gotten out of the habit, but I usually try to keep some educational things, especially like if there's going to be some seminars or things that I'm interested in. I like to share those there. But I just want to let y'all know, I really appreciate y'all having me. I wish I was there with you, but I feel like I'm with you, and that makes my heart happy.
Great. Well, we certainly appreciate this. And this is, I think this was an excellent presentation. I like the fact that we covered the two different topics, and both of them are things that we don't have a lot of experience with. So that's really great too. So we'll give you a round of applause. Thank you very much, Christine.
Thank you.
Before, and hopefully, as I mentioned earlier, hopefully you can come up and visit us just on a weekend trip or something, and let us know when you come to town, and we'll try to make something happen for you then. Before we do wrap up, I do want to remind everybody that our next meeting is on April 6th. And that night we actually have, again, kind of a two-part program. Our first part is previews of the garden sales that'll be coming up in April and May from our friends at the Dixon Gardens and Lichterman Nature Center, the Memphis Botanic Garden, and Story Plants Audubon Center. And they all carry different things. So you're going to want to hear about all those. And you'll want to have a pad and pen so you can make notes about what they've got and when they're going to have it and all that good stuff. The second half is a short presentation from Stephen Hayden about establishing fruit trees. And we booked him because back in January, when we heard about the garden at St. Jude, the speaker mentioned the Giving Grove program about establishing fruit trees in the community. And some of you said you wanted to know more about that. So we've got him going to talk about that. So there you go. And also, I always thank you for being a member of the Memphis Horticultural Society, because your membership dues do nothing more than pay for us to have speakers. And if you're not a member, please visit the memphishorticulture.org to get the membership form that you can mail in with your dues. So thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate everybody here. And thank you very much, Christine. I look forward to seeing you in person. I have dropped in on some of our speakers, like Patrick over at Auburn and stuff. So you might just see me one day. I do like to get out and take little trips.
Come on down.
All right. So thank you very much, everybody, and we'll see you soon. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
It's 8 o'clock.